Hello, 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 home care, breakthrough family. Hope you guys are doing amazing. um, it's been a whirlwind for me. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in so long. Today we're going to talk about the 5 key levers for improving your recruiting results. And we're going to also talk about 3 retention tools. Okay. Let me go shut the door so it's not too loud. But yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind for me over here. I was out of town for a trip, and then I got back. And literally the day that I got back, I was prepping for a hurricane, and that went on for a few days. And then after that, I got really, really, really sick. And now I'm on the tail end of this sickness. I've just been out of commission most of the week. But I'm here, I'm alive, I'm awake, and I'm going to pour into you guys because I know that for a lot of people, recruiting is still... What's up, Mike? How are you? Anyone that's on here live, say hello, hello. Let me know where you guys are calling in from. But so I'm going to pour into you guys today. And if you're watching the replay, #replay. But just comment in the chat box. How many of you guys are still having some challenges with the recruiting piece? Comment below so I know. I'm assuming yes, because you're on here, but I don't want to assume. So comment in the chat box if you guys are having any type of struggles, issues. What's up, Hayen? How are you? Anybody having any challenges with the whole recruiting piece? Fortunately, I'm seeing improvements across the board, like with all my clients. Well, not with all my clients, but with most of my clients, and even other people in the industry are reporting just better results. And there's still people struggling, right? So I want to first start with one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, right? And I teach people this process. Hey, Tina, what's up? Oh, ghosting after an interview. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to touch on some of that today. This is actually an important piece here. So it's number 5 on my list, and you'll see how that impacts it. But reality is when I first started my business, one of the first, I don't remember, it was maybe like 9 or 10 months in, and we got this case from this elder law attorney that I've been trying to get, this referral relationship going for a while. So she finally calls me and she's like, all right, I got something for you. And it wasn't anything major. It was an overnight sitting case at a hospital to advocate for the patient. It's like, cool, we got this, no problem, we're good. So we start calling around. I call a caregiver, and the caregiver's like, yeah, I'll do it. And we said, all right, we'll call you back about 5 o'clock. The shift was supposed to start at like 6 o'clock. All right, we'll call you about 5 o'clock with the details and how to get there and all that fun stuff. So long story short, about 5 o'clock, we call her, and she ghosts us. Like, there's no response. We call her again. We're like, all right, we need a plan B. Right, so we start going through the rest of our list, and sure enough, everyone's like no or not answering their phone. So yours truly goes out there. And let's just put it this way, never in my life have I ever done an overnight shift. There's something about my sleeping patterns. Like, I've stayed up late before in college, right? But when it starts getting to like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, my body just starts to shut down. So here I am, I'm in the room, I'm trying to help this lady, advocating for her. It's getting late, and all of a sudden, I start dozing off. One of the things I'm like, if one of my caregivers did it, I'd kill them. Not really, but you know what I mean. So I start dozing off, and this lady had like a tracheotomy, and she starts in the middle of the night. So I jump out of my chair, freaking out, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I couldn't believe that I even fell asleep. And thankfully, she was okay, but it scared the crap out of me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be watching this lady. It's my responsibility. And here she is, choking. She got a tracheotomy, and I have one job. I couldn't do this one job. And I was like, never again. Like, I will never, ever be put in that position again where I can't staff something. So I went back to my office the next week and revamped everything from recruiting. We just changed, not the whole process, but we changed our way of doing recruiting. I said, I'd rather have a bigger bench. And yes, I realize that my bench may or may not stay, but I'd rather have that than ever be put in a position like this again. Now, fortunately, never happened again except one other time on a live-in shift, and I was only there for like 2 hours. But it started with really understanding, like, what are our goals? What are our targets? For many of you guys sitting on here, I know a lot of you have done this if you've been through my trainings before, but some of you haven't. It's like, how many hires do you need a week, right? Even if you're starting up, you want to start with half or one hire a week. You constantly have to be recruiting. There's one thing in this business is you always must be recruiting. It's better to have a bench. It's better to even lose some people. I'm not saying be dishonest, but reality is we don't know when or where our next case is going to come from. But the last thing I ever want to do, what's up, Katie? What's up, Tasha? Anyone that's on here, say hello. So I know where you guys are calling in from. But like, I never want to be in a position where that 24/7 case comes and I can't staff it. Like, I don't want to disappoint the client. I don't want to disappoint the your referral source. And I don't want to disappoint my business, right? 24/7 cases, my gosh, those bring in a lot, especially for private pay. Those bring in a lot of revenue. So it really does start. What's up, Dwayne? Long time no see, buddy. It starts with really understanding how many hires do I need a week, right? So when we implemented this in our business, I think we went from like 2 to 3 to what I call 3 net new hires. What's up, Katia? Awesome, South Florida. So hopefully you missed the storm. So it starts with that, right? So if I need 3 hires a week, and you guys can comment on here and tell me what your answer is. If I need 3 hires a week, how many interviews have to happen in order for me to get 3 people hired? Because I don't know about you guys, but I know statistically, according to the Home Care Pulse data, and I know from my own personal experience, we do not hire every single person that we interview for different reasons. 1, they might not be the right fit. 2, they never get their paperwork in. 3, they ghost you, etc. Michael said 25. They're usually not quite that many, but, right, typically the number that I tell people to use, if I'm going to hire 3, I need 6 interviews to happen. Statistically, according to the Home Care Pulse data, about 48 to 52%. It ranges over the last couple of years. So I use about 50%. So if I'm going to hire 3, I need 6 interviews to happen, right? The next question I ask people is, okay, if I need 6 interviews to happen, how many do I have to schedule? Banji's already a step ahead, right? Is it 12? Michael said 25, right? How many, if 6 interviews have to happen, 25 scheduled. Now that depends, right? Statistically in our industry, I don't have hard data on this, but what I'm seeing is a lot of people, their interview show-up rate falls somewhere between 30 to 40%. I know people where it's 60% plus, right? In truth, if you're below 50%, you've got some work to do. It's okay. It happens. I don't care how good you are. You're never going to get 100% interview show-up rate. It's just not going to happen. But statistically, the numbers I use is if I need 6 interviews to actually happen, I need 12 set up, right? So Banji, that's a good number. 12 set up to actually end up and go through the process and ultimately hire 3. All right, so my next question for you guys is, if I need 12 interviews set up, let's say it's 12 to 15. Well, we're gonna have to add in a little bit more. How many applications do I need to get that many interviews set up? What's your guess? Comment in the chat box. I know from my personal experience and professional experience is that probably close to 50% of the resumes that are sent over are not qualified. They're just not a good fit for one reason or another, right? So think about that. If 50% of them not qualified, I mean, if you're able to get all the rest to actually show up, to actually get scheduled for an interview, great. But in reality, it doesn't work that way. So comment in the chat box, curious on your guys' opinion on this, about how many applications. What's up, Vicky? What's up, Randy? About how, if I need 12 interviews scheduled, about how many applications do you need to see come across your desk? Just take a wild guess. There's no right or wrong answer. We just do guesstimates, right? I can give you some general numbers that we work off of. And then as you're running your business, you're going to need to adjust. But in reality, if I need 12 interviews set up, I probably need a minimum 48 applications. That's a good number, right? 48, 50, but the number 24, if I need 12 interviews set up, I need probably, oh, you guys are losing me. Tasha, can you guys hear me? Ashley said 60. That's a good number. Yeah, so normally I would tell people at a bare minimum, right? At a bare minimum, you probably need 25, 30. Minimum. And even that's not going to cut it. So yeah, we're going to shoot for 40, 50, 60. That's reality, folks. Now, I know some of you are like, but, Greg, I don't have that. I can't get that. This is just a starting point, right? This is just a starting point because we need to gauge where we are. So it kind of leads into when we talk about what are the levers, right? What are the core levers that are going to help you the most? Yeah, in some places it's not realistic to get 60, but it's not unrealistic either. Right? If you're in a really rural market, but truth be told, I have clients, Austin is saturated. Yeah, Jennifer, honestly, maybe not in Austin, but I have clients in other parts of Texas that are getting, 50, 60 applications a week. So it's not unrealistic. Again, your market may or may not be saturated. But what I tell people is, like, we keep tweaking and we keep iterating. There's infinite number of resources. There's infinite number of sources that are available to you to drive numbers. Okay. And there's infinite ways of doing things. I'll give you guys some examples later. I had a client who shared something the other day about how he's literally doubled his number of hires, and I don't know if he doubled his number of applications. I didn't get into that far with him, but basically what he did is he started playing with the algorithms with Indeed in the free version. And then he hired someone who was literally designed just to update ads for him. And there's a way that he did it. I'm not going to share because he didn't give me permission to share. But point is that he said, Greg, I followed your process. I kept iterating. And we went from 5 hires a week to now 9 hires a week. So not quite double the number of hires, but big difference. Okay. So I don't buy into the, it's not possible. And Jennifer, I love you to pieces, right? I love you. I love you guys. So my reason for bringing this up is that there's always another source. There's always another opportunity, whether it be pay-per-click, whether it be, really getting better with your referral programs for caregiver referrals, whether it be SEO, whether it be Facebook ads or Facebook unemployment section, or not Facebook employment section, or the unemployment office, or the CNA schools, or something else. There's always something else that can be done. There's Google ads. Like, there's never not something that you can do, right? One of my mentors, I'll say semi-mentors, Tony Robbins, he talks about it's like you set a target, you set a goal, and then you keep doing it until you get the result you need, right? And I know you guys have scaled super fast and done amazing, and I believe you that your market's saturated, and all we have to do is get more applications than the competitors. That's one piece of it. It's not just getting the applications, but that's a big part of it. So when we talk about the levers, right, it really does start with our recruiting KPIs. So it's not just having the KPIs and tracking, but once you understand your numbers, right, once you understand where you are, then that tells you the story. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that they're not even tracking your numbers. Jennifer, I know you guys are, but there's a lot of people that aren't. Or there's people that track it, but then they don't have a process and a system for, okay, now that we've got these numbers, what do we do with them, right? What's the next steps? So tracking your numbers and then having a weekly process, your biggest drivers in this industry, I say it all the time, it's sales recruiting, right? Those are the things that drive this business. All the other stuff's important, customer service, the financial stuff, all of those things matter. But reality is that if we are not paying enough attention, like eagle eye attention, on the things that really drive this business, then that's where we start to falter. Okay, so when we understand that those are the two drivers, recruiting, we have our numbers, we reverse engineered it, then we have a weekly process for reviewing the data. And when we do our weekly meetings, and the way we teach it is our primary focus really is on the two drivers. I still look at the other information, but my weekly meetings, we focus on this. And then when we're not hitting our targets, right, when we're not hitting our numbers, then we problem solve, right? And that's every week. So if you know you're not hitting your numbers in a certain area, like, is it applications? Is it my interview show-up rate? Is it my hire rate? So there's different things that you're going to measure inside of recruiting. And when you look at those things, I call them the gaps, right? So when you look at those things, every week you know where are we having trouble. And I don't look at any one week in a microscope. I look at a trend, right? So if it's like, okay, I need 60 applications, but I'm getting 40, well, that tells me, hey, I need to put more attention on gap number one. I need to get more applications. What are my options? What are my infinite possibilities? If it's your interview show-up rate, it's a different conversation, right? Some of you, your interview show-up rate is I schedule 10 interviews and 3 show up. That's 30%. And if that's the trend, then there's things we need to do there. All right, I'm going to talk about some of those in the future levers. All right, so the next piece, lever number 2. It starts with understanding our numbers, but lever number 2 is really about how many of you guys have been on Facebook before, right? You've been on Facebook, you're scrolling through Facebook, and then sometimes you see ads that capture your attention. It could be an image, it could be the messaging, it could be something else. Well, my experience has been, and I've had these conversations, I've got enough clients that have communicated this to me, that like when you run ads that are not compelling, when you run ads that are not speaking to the people directly, when you run ads that are more about you and less about what's in it for them, and your messaging is just not, it's not reaching people, well, your results are going to suffer. Okay? So you can have the same money that you're spending on advertising, but if your messaging and if your ad copy is not attracting people, which this happened to me, right? I would run ads and I was just copying what at the time I was part of a franchise. My franchise was like, here, do these ads. And they're very stale. They're very boring. They're very corporate-y. And it doesn't mean you're not going to get applications, but the truth of the matter is that when I started implementing stuff that I was learning from one of my mentors, and I started to tweak my messaging, tweak my headings, do things to capture attention, my number of applications doubled, tripled. And this is the case for a lot of people. I'm not saying that, hey, you get a couple ads right and your application count is going to double or triple. But again, I know I literally have had clients where it's quadrupled or more. And I'm not just saying that. So reality is that you need to start to look at your ad copy and make sure that the messaging is touching on the right points. All right, people make decisions. Well, they make decisions based on emotion. We'll talk about that in a moment. But people make decisions either moving towards pleasure or away from pain. And unfortunately, moving away from pain is the bigger motivator. So I tell people, as you start to go through your pre-screening process and talking to caregivers and finding out what their pain points are, you can tweak your messaging to appeal to them. And we have a whole formula that we've used, which I learned from one of my mentors on, like, how do you bring that to the surface and then show people a new opportunity? So this way they're like, this is it. This is where I want to work. This is where I want to apply. Does that make sense? Comment in the chat box if that makes sense. Hey, Belinda. Hey, Aster. All right. When you understand, because the psychology behind how people operate and your messaging speaks to them directly, you can spend the same amount of money or you can run the same ads and sometimes double or triple your output. Okay? So the next piece is we're going to move into lever number 3. How many of you guys, just comment in the chat box, how many of you guys have had challenges before with getting caregivers to show up for interviews? All right. How many of you have had that happen where you had trouble getting caregivers to actually show up? And I don't care if you're perfect and you guys do amazing. You're never going to get 100% show up rate for caregiver interviews. Probably in our industry, the most that I've ever seen is maybe 60, 65%. So if you had to guess, what percentage of your caregivers show up for interviews? just rough guesstimates, put it in the chat box. What percentage of your caregivers do you think show up, or they're not even your caregivers, your potential applicants, your potential caregivers, what percentage actually show up for interviews? If you schedule 10, do 3 show up, do 5 show up, do 6 show up, do 4 show up, do 2 show up on average? What would you guess is your interview show up rate? So Michael said 40%. Okay. Yeah, I'd say, from having these conversations, a lot of times that's typically what people experience, somewhere 30, 40%, right? But I'm here to tell you, and I promise you this, that it's fixable, all right? It's fixable. And part of it is understanding, again, it comes back to the psychology of how people operate. So when you understand that your caregivers, and I'll share a story of how my office used to do it, is like, if it clicked for me. All right, so my office, caregiver will call up, and one of the first things that they would say is, okay, so, quick rapport, like, oh, thanks so much for applying. We got your resume. So are you a licensed CNA? Where are you working right now? Not a bad question. Oh, can you guys hear me? Comment in the chat box. Let me know if you can hear me. Aster saying she can't. And by the way, part of this could be the power here. A hurricane went through here this past week. So, or last week. Cleanup was this week. So we're still getting our power lines back. Let me know if you guys can hear me, though. Can you hear me? All right. Just let me know because, okay, good. Michelle heard me. So, so my staff would start going through this process of they would jump straight into what I call logistics, right? They would jump straight into logistics. They'd say, are you licensed? Do you have your CPR? Do you have reliable transportation? Blah, 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 blah. All of these things are important, right? I'm not going to say that they're not, but the truth of the matter is that those are not the things that are going to help you get them to the other side, right? It matters to you because you're like, well, I can't invest time into them if they're not certified. I get it. Sometimes you'll be able to determine some of that from the application. Sometimes you can't. But the truth of the matter is that you need to, once we started treating our recruiting as a sales process. What do I mean by that? Sales is, and people get yucky with that word. They're like, oh, sales, and it scares them. But it's not. If you really understand what sales is, all sales is understanding what people want and then communicating how what you have to offer can help them. Understanding what they want and then communicating how what you have to offer may be able to help them. It's really that simple. Now, obviously, they want $25 an hour, probably can't offer that, even in California, right? But the truth of the matter is that it's more about the process than it is about what they say. It's the process. It's understanding the WIFMs. When you understand the process and you understand what they want, and then you have a process for not just understanding what they want, building connection, tapping into the heart level, which I'll get into in a moment. Once you're able to do those things and you get them excited and you build urgency, those things are the things that matter. So if you're at a 30%, 40% show up rate, 9 times out of 10, it's one of two things. It's either because your process is not doing a good job of building that excitement, urgency, and heart-centered connection, right? Or understanding the WIFMs and being able to communicate how you can help them. Or number 2, the second part of that, which I'm going to talk about, it's actually the fourth lever, and I bring this up because the fourth lever, I keep seeing it again and again and again and again. And I'm going to share a story first, right? I've had multiple conversations where I've had clients who, one client not too long ago, right? She went from 8 hires a month to 28. I had another client last year who they doubled their number of hires because of one thing. And I will share with you what that one thing is. And you've heard this cliche many, 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 many times, right? Getting the right people. All they did, the client I was referring to just recently, she literally had a person in her office that was same process, same everything, but she had someone else doing the process. And because that person was better at building the connection, following the process, creating excitement, creating urgency, their hire numbers doubled. And this happened 4 or 5 weeks in a row. And then unfortunately, that person had to go back to where they were. They had to go back to school. The other story, the person that went from 8 to 28, she did 2 things. I'll talk about the second thing in a moment. But one of the things that she did was she changed the person in the seat. Now, I get it. I've run a business. I'm running a business now. I ran a home care business for a long time. I understand. Most of you have smaller staff. And it's like, okay, well, we don't, when you change someone over, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. You don't have another spot for them. You don't like to fire people. I'm not sitting here telling you should fire someone. I am encouraging to look very, very carefully at the person in the seat. It matters a lot. Right? It matters a lot. And it's not just recruiting, it's scheduling. It's all of the positions in your company. Like one of the things we're doing for our mastermind groups is like we have a people hiring tool that we're now using that we're going to be rolling out that will help them get better at evaluating their staff based on understanding the traits and the qualities that they're looking for particular roles. And when you understand that, and then there's other pieces to it, like making sure that they're aligned with the company values, that they really get it and they want it and they've got the capacity to do the job. Like there's other pieces to it, but it really starts with each role. Each role requires certain traits and qualities. Okay? These traits and qualities will mostly determine whether or not they're going to be successful. I promise you, this happens again and again and again and again and again. Right people, right seats, right bus. And what I mean by the right bus is the right company structure. All right. Sometimes the structure is off. Okay. So next piece. I told you I'd talk about this is lever number 5. But this is the second reason why that client went from 8 to 28 hires. I've been preaching for a long time about this. And it's not just in recruiting, it's in sales as well. And I said this way, way back at the beginning of this conversation. I said, people make decisions based on emotion. That's how we're driven. That's how we're wired. We often use logic to back it up, but the emotion is what drives us. Does that make sense? Comment in the chat box if that makes sense, right? Or comment in the chat box, emotion, right? We make decisions based on emotion. So how do we leverage this as part of your process and part of your strategy to get better results in your recruiting, right? What do? Well, one of my clients, I said, listen, and I said this to everyone, they took action. They're like, Greg, we should have listened. You've been saying this for 2 years. We've been doing, you've been talking about this for 2 years and we finally did it. But I promise we pay attention to what you say. I'm like, I know you do. I just have a lot to say. I say a lot of stuff. But, and people are where they are, right? So it's like sometimes a message, you can go through, like I have people that go through my trainings 3 or 4 or 5 times, and every time they go through it, they learn something different because they weren't ready for it the first time, or the second time, or the third time. It was once you're ready, and you learn a new thing. My point for bringing this up is like, I didn't judge her. She they got it, and they finally went through this process, and they looked at every touch point within their recruiting system, everything from their ads to their pre-screening process, to their interview process, to their orientation, to their onboarding. And he said, all right, how can we tap into emotion? What are the things that we could do? Everything from some of the interview questions that they were asking. I teach some stuff in how we used to do it in our orientation, right? So for those of you that are talking about like, all right, well, they're ghosting me. Tina, I know you mentioned this happened before. I'm not saying that this is the case or why you get ghosted. You're still going to get ghosted no matter what. But if it's happening a lot and there's a trend, it's usually because there's not enough excitement, there's not enough urgency, and there's not enough emotional connection. Okay, now there's layers to this. We're not going to have time. I go through a whole session on this with my clients, but like there's so much that goes into really being able to tap into that emotion. You guys don't need me for this, but you can look at your process and that'll be the first step and see, what can I do? What can I do to tap into that emotion and really start to build that connection? Because I promise you, if you do that and you do that effectively and you up level it one more time, even if you think you're already doing it, Tina, right? Up leveling it one more time and you start tracking your numbers, I will bet money that your show up rate and your will increase and your ghosting will decrease. Okay? That's just how there's reality. I was having the conversation with one of my coaches today, someone that works for me, is that, and she was a client and now she works for us. I said, Home Care Pulse used to track this. I don't know if they still do, but we're human beings. And as human beings, we want to be part of something bigger. We want to be something part of bigger than ourselves. And she was talking about like the 8 qualities, the 8 traits of good leadership. And one of those things is getting people bought into your vision, getting people bought into your why. So when you understand how to do that effectively, your retention is going to increase. Even with your in-office staff, like what are we doing to get them bought into this mission, the vision, like true leadership? I wasn't always good at that, right? But with my home care business, I was passionate about it, right? So people felt that and they saw the bigger vision of what we were doing. And they're like, okay, I want to be part of that. I even had caregivers because in my ad copy, I'd talk about like our wellness program and how we're changing the face of home care and da-da-da-da. That was our mission. And they saw it in the ad copy. And I remember the caregiver, couple, more than one, but specifically this one caregiver, she was awesome. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called me. I'm so glad you called me. I read your ad and I saw what you guys are doing. She's like, I want to be a part of this. And this same girl, she stayed with us for a long time. It's probably 3 years. And she had offers and opportunities for $2 more an hour in other places. Eventually she left because she got like $3+ more. She's like, Greg, I have to take it. It's at the hospital. It's in the cancer center. And they're offering me, I don't remember what she was making. Like they're offering her 15 at the time and we were paying her 11, something like that. I was like, I totally get it. I totally get it. Oh, so Tina's asked me like what my ad said. There's a whole formula that we teach, but I don't remember the exact specifics. All I can tell you is that I talked about our mission really as part of the ad copy, right? So it's hard to explain here. I have a whole structure that we teach on it, but inside of it, I talked about like the mission, the vision, and I really talked about just what I said. It's like we're changing the face of home care, right? We've developed a wellness program where our goal is to help people and to help our clients improve their quality of life and be more proactive. And in home care, we have like a huge opportunity to be able to do that in the home. And you, as the caregiver, are going to be a huge part of that. So I don't remember the exact wording, Tina, but it was something along those lines. It wasn't the only thing that the ad said, but it was one piece of it, right? So for you guys, you really need to think about what is the bigger vision? What is that compelling reason? And then the second piece of that is like, how would that excite a good caregiver? And what happens is when you actually have good copy, is that you'll start attracting people who are attracted to the mission. And those people that are attracted to the mission are going to be better quality than someone who's just looking for a job. Does that make sense? Comment in the chat box if that makes sense. So hopefully that helps, but really looking at the heart level, now we're going to move into some key retention pieces. All right. So have any of you guys ever worked in a dead-end job? Comment in the chat box if you've ever been in a dead-end job where you knew there really wasn't any opportunity for growth, advancement, whatever. Have you guys ever been in that position? Comment in the chat box if you have. Let me know how it felt for you, right? I remember being, it was a sales job and there was an opportunity for growth, but it was a long road. And I was like, I'm not interested in that long road. Well, I bring this up because one of the pieces that when I think about our industry, right, and when you look at the caregiver role, to an extent, it really is a dead-end job. Now, sure, people hopefully are doing it because they love it and that's what they want, but part of human nature, it's not true for everyone, but for most people, part of human nature is that we want to grow, right? We want to get to the next level. We want to evolve. We want to make more money. So one of the things that we teach is how do you create a career path for your caregivers, right? It is a retention tool. It's actually an attraction tool as well that will help you get more applications and convert more people because they're going to be like, wow, this is a company where I don't just come in and then hope that eventually I get a raise or wait for my annual review. They actually have laid out a plan where I can go from level 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4. So creating a career path for your caregiver is something that will get them a little bit more bought in. It will make them question, like if they're considering leaving, it'll actually make them question, hey, do I really want to leave? I've got so much opportunity here. If I go over to this company, yeah, I'll make a little bit more maybe in the short run, maybe. But then what? So putting together a growth path for your caregivers is something that can be super impactful. The second part is, and part of this actually can tie in perfectly, guys, to your growth path. The second part is creating some type of a caregiver mentor program. Now, I know there's some of you on here that have tried that. You've tested it. Some people are like, oh, well, it's sort of worked or it didn't work. And a lot of it depends on how you structure it. I know Home Care Pulse has been talking about this for several years. I've had clients that have implemented this and have seen results. But when you have some, and it's structured the right way, you can create a caregiver mentor program. And one of the main reasons for doing that, you guys have heard this before, but most of the turnover with your caregivers happens within the first 90 days, right? So if most of the turnover happens in the first 90 days and you have some type of a mentor program, then you have a process and feedback loops and ways to find out how things are going with your caregiver and that they feel like they're not just getting thrown to the wolves, right? They're actually getting onboarded the right way. All right, so there's lots of little pieces that go into creating that. The third and final piece for the retention part of it is, what does your touch point plan look like, right? And so it's really a combination of touch points and feedback loops. And what do I mean by that? All right. Some of you guys have this for clients. Some of you don't. In fact, I just did a training for my mastermind group on like customer service. When we were part of our franchise, 2 years in a row, we had the highest customer satisfaction scores in our network. And I was proud of that, right? Because we really put a lot of effort into finding clients, but how do we keep them, right? Because it costs 5 times more to get a new client than it does to keep the ones that you have, right? So same thing applies with caregivers. It costs you a lot more money to get new caregivers than it does to keep the ones that you have. So part of putting together a touch point plan is understanding what level and how often am I communicating with them after we hire them to find out how they're doing, what do they need, and then creating what we call little feedback loops. All right, a feedback loop it's a loop where we gather information and then it gets looped back to me as the owner. So I have my finger on the pulse and I have a better idea as to what's going on. And that tells me what changes and what tweaks I can make as a company. All right. So I'm a big proponent of feedback loops, right? That could be done in surveys. We used to do about once a month. We used to do like a breakfast. We'd pick about 10 or 15 caregivers and say, hey, we're taking a breakfast and we want to get feedback from you guys. That could be done in supervisory visits when you go to the client's home and you're talking to the client and the caregiver. It could be done in conversations, right? So you have a touch point plan, and part of that is you're gathering information. How are we doing? What can we do better? Et cetera, et cetera. So you need to have a formalized process for this. And then in the process, like I said, you're gathering information, and then you have this loop, this feedback loop of information that comes to you as the owner, and you're like, okay, these are the tweaks. These are the changes that we need to make. All right. Our caregivers are not feeling appreciated. All right. Or our caregivers feel the communication is lacking between the office and the caregivers. Or they're putting me on cases that are too far away from my home. So when you start to see the trends and you start to see the patterns and you start to understand a little bit more about what we're doing that's going well, what are we doing that's not going well, this feedback loops, you now want to use this information to help drive your decisions. Okay. Comment in the chat box if this makes sense. There's a power. I use feedback loops. I talk about them all the time. It's not just with your caregivers, it's clients, it's your internal staff. So if you do not have these built-in feedback loops, then what's happening is that you're just operating blindly. Like another piece that, and I talk about this a lot, but your KPIs is a feedback loop. It tells us a story, right? It tells us what's happening and how do we better manage our business, right? So if there's any of you like, you feel things are chaotic in your company, you feel things are not exactly where they need to be, you're having trouble finding caregivers, whatever it is, if you feel like these are areas that you're struggling with, these are pieces that, like from our company, these are things that we do, right? We have these pieces in place to help you guys grow and scale your business and really ultimately get to a point where you start to build and you start to put the pieces in place so you can get to a point where you have the people in place, you've got the KPIs, you've got the feedback loops, and now you're building a business that can ultimately run without you so you can focus more on strategy, quality, and having balance back in your life. All right. So if there's anyone on here watching that's like, hey, Greg, I'm toast, right? I'm toast. I need some help. I want some more balance. And you want to learn more about how we might be able to help you or serve you, just comment in the chat box, type in the words balance, and someone from our team will reach out to you, even if it's just a chat. But we can talk to you about what are the things that we can do to help you guys create a better business and more balance and more structure and grow and scale, increase your growth, increase your profitability, build the team the right way. All right, Esther said, I need to learn more. Awesome. Charlotte. All right, I'll have someone from my team message you guys, but these things are fixable, guys. It's fixable, and I know what it feels like. Honestly, things were chaotic in our business for a long time. That's part of why I do this. You know, when we sold our business, I'm like, gosh, I remember those early years and I didn't have the roadmap, right? It's hard when you don't have a roadmap. You're just kind of flying blind and you're like, I'm going to try this. This sounds good. I'm going to try this. This sounds good, right? But when you have a roadmap, it makes your life so much easier, right? It's not a magic bullet. You still have to put in the energy and the time and whatnot, but it's fixable. So anyway, that's all I got. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If it was helpful, let me know. Like I said, if you need more support, more help, just type balance below and have an amazing rest of your day. Bye, everyone.